in this video, I'm going to explain Node.js in the simplest way possible. So there's no complicated jargons and no unnecessary theory, just real understanding using simple examples that actually make sense. So first thing first, what exactly is Node.js? Node.js is simply a tool that allows you to run JavaScript outside the browser. So, before we've always been using JavaScript in the browser, but before Node.js ever existed, JavaScript lived only inside the browser. Now you could only click buttons, you can do things like validating forms, creating animations and the likes, but you couldn't do things like building a server, creating APIs, you couldn't talk to databases, you couldn't handle user authentication and the likes. All those things before we're done with languages like Python, PHP, Java, C Sharp. And then Node.js came along and basically said, okay, what if we could use JavaScript on the browser and also on the server? So, and that's when I just changed the entire web development world. And now with Node.js, you can use the same language on the front end, you can use it on the back end. So that's why we have what we call the main stack. You've heard of the main stack where you say MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. So basically, you're using Node on the front end and also on the back end. Now, which means you're just dealing with one language, one ecosystem, which just makes things smoother right from the beginning. So you don't need to learn tons of different languages just to build a full stack web. All you just need is JavaScript and you're good to go. So think of it like this, in case you don't still understand. Before Node.js, JavaScript only worked inside the browser. You go to your browser and you do things like, okay, I need to console.log stuff, and then you want to make some computations within it, just maybe simple functions within it. Yeah, you can do that. Clicking buttons, alerts, pop these and that. So you can do just simple um prompts and get your response instantly in the browser. When I say in the browser, not necessarily directly in the browser, you can be using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and that basically runs on the browser. So that's what I actually mean. We can now create servers with the use of Node.js with JavaScript. Alright, I hope that makes sense. But then, if you don't understand this, you understand as you go and with more basic examples. Now, you might be wondering, why did Node.js become so popular? Why is it that many people are using it? Now, the simple answer I'll just give you is just you need grammar. It's just the speed and the scalability. It does this using different approach compared to traditional server. So I'm going to let me just give you an analogy. Using a traditional server, how it works versus how Node.js works now. So now let's use a simple restaurant example. This might not be the first time you're hearing a restaurant scenario, but yeah, it's very important to pay attention to this. So imagine a restaurant where every other customer gets their own personal chef. So like customer one gets chef one, customer two, chef two, customer three, chef three, and the likes. Now that sounds great at first. You have your own chef creating your dish, serving you your food and whole. But then what happens when you have 1,000 customer working? Now you need 1,000 chefs. Now that becomes expensive. That becomes slow, and it's very hard to manage. You can have 1,000 chefs. So basically, you have to respond to those customers you came into first before having to. So it's very slow. Now that's how traditional servers work. One request equals one thread. Now, so if 1,000 users visit your application, the server creates 1,000 threads at the same time, and that consumes a lot of memory, lots of resources. Now, let's look at Node.js. Instead of giving every customer a chef, Node.js gives them a waiter. Now, here's what a waiter does. The waiter takes your order, sends it to the kitchen, moves on to the next customer, and when the food is ready, the waiter brings it back to you. So, one waiter can serve 10 customers, 50 customers, even 100 customers. A single waiter can do that. Now that's how Node.js works. It uses just one thread to handle thousands of requests. And that's the secret behind its speed. So just one thread handles thousands of users, thousands of requests, as opposed to one thread, one request. Now, there are three core ideas of Node.js that you need to take note of. If you understand these three things, then you understand most of Node.js. In fact, you understand up to 80% of Node.js. The number one thing is it is single threaded. Number two, it is non-blocking. And then the third one, it is event driven. Now, let's break each one of them down. When we talk about single threaded, we're saying it uses one thread to undo thousands of requests, just like I said. And now, that may sound like a bad thing at first because you might think, wait, only one thread, wouldn't that be slow? But here's the trick. Node.js does not do every work directly on the main thread. Instead, it delegates every task to the background. So the main thread stays free to undo new requests. So when every request comes in, it just pushes to the background. And now let's talk about what we talk about. I want to talk about blocking and non-blocking code. So when I say blocking code waits. Non-blocking code does not wait. Now let's imagine you're reading a file. In a blocking system, the server will say, I will not do anything else until this file is completely read. So everything stops and waits. That's blocking. But in Node.js, things work differently. Node says, I start reading this file in the background. Why that's happening, I'll continue doing other work. So when the file is ready, Node comes back to get it, and that is how non-blocking behaves. So this is one of the main reasons Node.js is fast. So a task that takes time, it's relegated, put it in the background, continues the other requests. And when the file in the background is done, when the request and everything is done and the response is ready, it goes back to it and brings it up. So that way it's able to work on many requests without having to wait for one to complete before doing the other. So now let's talk about the event-driven part. Now, Node.js works based on events. Something happens, then Node reacts. For example, user sends a request, a file finishes loading, a timer completes, database response, things like that. So Node listens to these events, and when they happen, it executes the appropriate code. So instead of waiting around, Node is always moving, always listening, always reacting. So at the center of all this is something called the event loop. So the event loop is like a manager. Here's what it does. First, it receives the task. Then it check, is this task fast or is it slow? If it's fast, it runs it immediately. If it's slow, it's like reading a file, like querying a database, waiting for a network response. So it sends that task to the background, then it continues handling another task. And when the background task is done, the result comes back and Node processes it. This cycle keeps repeating, and that's the event loop. And that's what makes Node.js efficient. Okay, so let's create a simple Node.js server. Node.js has an inbuilt built-in HTTP module. Here's a basic example. First, we import the HTTP module. Then we create a server. Inside the server, we tell it what to do when the request comes in. In this case, we simply send back the text hello from Node.js. Then we tell the server to listen on port 3000. Now, if you open your browser and go to localhost 3000, you see that the message appears. And just like that, we've created the server using Node.js. But then there's something much more better. Now, in real projects, you don't use the raw HTTP module because it can get a bit repetitive and messy. So instead, we use a framework called Express. Express is the most popular Node.js framework. So it makes building servers and APIs much simpler. With Express, the same server becomes much shorter, cleaner. You just import Express, you create an app, you define a route, and then you send the response. That's it. So it's much easier to read, it's easier to scale, it's easier to maintain. Node.js is used by some very big companies, for example, Netflix, PayPal, LinkedIn, Uber, many real-time messaging platforms. It's very good for It's good for APIs, for chat applications, for real-time dashboards, for streaming platforms, for SaaS products. So there are many cases and many use cases for Node.js. Now, Node.js is great, but it's not just perfect for everything. That's why I say I have people using some other programming language out there. So it's not the best choice for certain heavy CPU tasks like video encoding, like complex data processing, like machine learning workloads and the like. So Node.js is single threaded. It's um uh it uses just one thread. So and every computation can definitely block the system. So for CPU intensive tasks, other technologies might be better. Let's quickly summarize everything. Node.js is a JavaScript runtime that runs outside the browser. It is single-threaded, it is event-driven, it is non-blocking, and it was built for speed and scalability. So if Node.js ever felt confusing before, I hope this video made it much clearer. If you'd like, I can also create a beginner Node.js project or a full backend tutorial, even a complete Node.js crash course. Just let me know in the comments. And if this video helped you, don't forget to like and to subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Have fun.